Have you ever felt completely alone in the face of overwhelming danger? Imagine being thousands of miles from home, surrounded by hostile strangers with nothing between you and certain death except your faith. It was 1950s Kenya during the turbulent Mau Mau uprising. Missionary John Davy and his family faced a night that would forever change their lives and their understanding of divine protection. The dense jungle pressed in around the small missionary home as twilight faded into darkness. Inside, the young missionary family, John, his wife Sarah, and their 2 children, prepared for bed after a long day of sharing the gospel with the local villagers. They had spent months learning the language, building trust, and offering medicine and hope to the local community. But not everyone welcomed their message. Unbeknownst to the family, a group of men from a neighboring tribe had grown increasingly hostile toward their presence. One night, as the family was getting ready for bed, John heard something outside. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard voices, low and menacing. Peeking through a crack in the wooden shutters, his heart stopped. Torches flickered in the darkness, and shadowy figures emerged, surrounding the small home. Machetes glinted in the moonlight. A mob was gathering, their intentions clear: eliminate the foreign missionaries. John and Sarah huddled with their children, knowing that conventional defense was impossible. With no local authorities to call, no means of escape, they did the only thing left. They prayed. Gathering their children, the family knelt in the center of the house. They clutched hands tightly, their voices trembling as they prayed. They begged for God's protection, for deliverance from what seemed inevitable. The mob outside grew louder. John could hear the metallic clink of weapons being prepared. His heart raced as he braced himself for the moment the door would burst open. But nothing happened. The family prayed all night long, never daring to stop. As dawn broke, John finally mustered the courage to look outside. To his astonishment, the clearing was empty. The mob was gone. Not a single trace of them remained. Relief and gratitude washed over the family as they thanked God for sparing their lives. Still, John couldn't help but wonder, why didn't they attack? A year later, the mystery of that night stayed with John and Sarah as they continued their work in the village. Gradually, their efforts bore fruit, and people began to respond to the message of Christ's love. One day, to their astonishment, the chief of the tribe that had once sought their lives approached John, asking to hear more about Jesus. The chief's heart was softened, and he eventually chose to follow Christ. One afternoon, John and the chief sat together under the shade of a tree, talking about faith and forgiveness. Gathering his courage, John asked the question that had haunted him since that fateful night. "Chief," he said, "do you remember a year ago when your men surrounded our house? Why didn't you attack?" The chief's eyes widened in surprise. "Attack? How could we?" he said. "You were protected." "Protected?" John repeated, puzzled. "We had no weapons. We were completely defenseless." The chief's expression grew serious, his eyes reflecting a mix of awe and fear. "We were ready to attack," he admitted. "We were going to kill you that night. But when we approached, we saw them." "Saw what?" John asked, confused. "The soldiers," the chief said, his voice lowering to a whisper. "An army of tall men in shining garments, holding swords. They stood all around your house, on the roof, in the yard, everywhere. Soldiers so massive, so powerful, that no one dared to take a single step closer." John's breath caught in his throat, and tears welled in his eyes. He knew then that their prayers had been answered in a way beyond anything they could have imagined. God had sent his angels to stand guard that night, an invisible army to protect his servants. As the chief finished speaking, John whispered a prayer of gratitude. He realized that this moment, sitting with the very man who had once sought to kill him, was proof of the power of prayer and the greatness of God's mercy. What the missionaries had experienced as faith, the local mob had witnessed as an actual angelic intervention. And so the story of that night, the night the angels stood guard, became a testimony of faith that would echo for generations. This isn't just a story from the past. Miracles aren't confined to history books. They happen today to ordinary people who dare to believe. Have you experienced an unexplained moment of protection? Share your story in the comments below. And if this testimony touched your heart, hit that subscribe button to hear more incredible stories of angels and miracles. Remember, sometimes the most powerful protection is the one you cannot see.